So one of the things that you can do to ensure that your students are successful on the TSIC is to create objective-driven lesson plans. Objective-driven lesson plans are going to focus on key points, and these key points are going to clearly articulate what students need to know or be able to do in order to master the objective or learning outcome at the end of the lesson. There are 3 elements of key points. The first element is knowledge. The second element is skills, and the third element is real-world relevance. So why are key points important? Key points are important because they focus the lesson on the most essential information. They prevent the teacher from skipping important ideas or overwhelming the students with too much information at once. So as you've reviewed the learning outcomes, you can see that the TSIC covers a lot of information, a lot of content, and that can be really overwhelming for students. And even though this is a capstone exam and you are covering this content over the course of 3 courses, you probably in 3rd level nutrition science and diet therapy want to kind of reiterate some of those key points and make sure that the students completely understand the information that maybe they learned in human studies or nutrition across the lifespan. Key points allow us to break down that information and condense it into a simpler form to understand. So there are 3 components of key points. The first component is knowledge. What are the specific concepts that your students should take away at the end of the lesson or learning outcome? What are they going to be expected to know? Maybe at the end of the lesson, at the end of the unit, however you want to design your course. The second component is skills. Communicate to students how the learning will occur and what the process is for completing a particular skill. What will they be expected to do or perform at the career level? The last component is real-world relevance, and probably the most important. Tell students why it's important to master the particular learning outcomes and how it applies to earning TSIC certification for careers and post-secondary credit. I would say this is the most important because the TSIC has a lot of case study-based questions, and it's not enough for students just to know the information. They also need to know how to apply it in a real-world setting. So let's take a look at one of the dietetics and nutrition areas. So the content area is socio-ecological nutrition. Learning outcome 1 says describe the USDA, FNS, and the Department of Human Services. So you want to break this down into what do I want my students to know, how do I want them to show me they know it, and what is the real world relevance. So we use a planner like this, and so you can see that it is basically labeled with the content area and the learning outcome. The key points that I want my students to understand and leave the lesson knowing would be that these are government agencies, and I want them to know what each agency stands for and what it is. So you can see here that we've got the USDA, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, FNS, the Food Nutrition Service, and the Department of Human Services. If you wanted to take it up a notch, you could have the students look into the history of these organizations. You could have them look at who the leader of these agencies are. If you wanted to challenge your students, the skills that they would need to know from this learning outcome would be to look at the roles and services of each of these agencies and to explain the purpose of them. So what I might do as far as a lesson goes is I might have the students research and present these organizations. I may have them create a presentation for their peers. I may even have them create a presentation for maybe another class that I had. So maybe if I were covering this in nutrition across the lifespan, I may have them create an informational graphic for my students in Intro to Human Studies. I would have the resources that they would need, or they could go find those resources on their own. But basically, we need the students to understand what these agencies are, what their service, what their role is, and how that is used in nutrition. And so I may have them brainstorm ways that the USDA impacts our lives. So for example, farming techniques, or there is a standard in nutrition across the lifespan of tracing the origin of food from point of origin to point of sale. So I may have them connect that back there. So that would be that real world relevance. Like I said, it's more than just knowing what the USDA is. These students have to be able to apply that knowledge and how that would work in the real world. You may even give them a case study. So maybe a farmer has, maybe there's been a situation, a natural disaster, or something, and you may have them brainstorm which government agencies would help that farmer. So like I said, it's more than just taking that information and learning the information. The application of that information is critical. So I'm going to give you one to look at. So in the content area of medical nutrition therapy, learning outcome 11 says to recognize the conditions and diseases which impact the digestive process and understand the dietary changes to manage these conditions. Now, this learning outcome is a lot more complex than that previous learning outcome that we looked at. So here you're going to have multiple conditions and diseases to look at. So you may have them looking at diverticularitis. You may have them look at gallstones. You may have them looking at GERD or acid reflux. There's a lot of different conditions and diseases for the digestive process. So it may take a little bit of background information before the students are able to master this learning outcome. So what I want you to do for this next assessment is I want you to complete this information. So you can set it up using content area, learning outcomes, key points and skills, and then just brainstorm and add some lessons and activities that you would include for your students to do.